There we go.
Good evening and welcome to the shortened version of the Planning Policy Commission for May the 21st, 5th.
Oh, I
Tonight
can't hear you. You need your microphone on.
See, when you're away 2 weeks, you just forget the whole process and everything that's going on. So let's start this over again. So welcome to the May 25th meeting of the Planning Policy Commission. Tonight, we are going to have a shortened version of what's going on in the TIP, and we have our fearless leader, Kurt, to tell us why the city is doing what it's doing, what the plans are going to be in the future. Kurt, please take it on.
Thank you very much. Kurt Seaman, Transportation Manager here at the City of Issaquah. And I know we have an hour set aside, and we could probably talk about this for many hours, and I just out of respect to everyone's time, and I do want really to spend the bulk of this time hearing from you and having a conversation about any questions or comments you have about either our process or our projects. So, but I did want to take a few minutes just to go through sort of a few basics, probably review for many of you, but just to make sure we get on the same page. So first of all, the TIP is so why do we do it? It's our plan for transportation improvements. It's required. There's an RCW 35-77-010 that requires cities to prepare TIPs. They're typically 6-year plans. We typically pay a lot more attention in the projects that are that we have more certainty either for funding or what kind of project it is, and those are typically in the first few years of the plan. It's a very important document for us, besides it being a state requirement, but it's important for funding eligibility when grants and other opportunities present themselves to have an updated and accurate TIP that reflects what our transportation goals are for Issaquah is essential. So that's the reason we do it. It helps, aside from being a state requirement, it helps us and helps us all get on the same page as a community about what's most important transportation-wise for projects. So, and just process-wise, I wanted to talk a little bit about that because in the past, we have presented the TIP as somewhat of a standalone document, and this year what's different is the TIP. I don't know how much you've been involved or following our city's capital improvement plan process, but the way we're looking at capital projects now is citywide. So what you have, and you have we gave you one of these, right? So this is actually, this is the proposed city's capital improvement project. That's a much larger document than just this, and it includes all of the capital, so that's parks and all of the capital projects that the city would propose finance. Any capital projects that we have are in this document. Our portion of this is the transportation part of that, which it's quite extensive. If you see, it has a project description and a proposed budget funding sheet for each of the projects, and it is actually included in the larger CIP. And so what council has been doing is they've met in one or more workshops. I think they're having 2 total, and this will be coming to them in a public hearing on June 5th for a public hearing for the CIP and for the TIP. So it's a little confusing, except for, if you want to think about it, the CIP is sort of the overarching larger capital project document, and the TIP resides within that. So does that make sense? Okay, so far so good. So and so I did want to, so like I said, there's a lot of projects in this document, and they vary in complexity and detail. And but I would like to highlight, so this is not a scientific list here, but I wanted to go through a dozen or so projects just to kind of give you a feel for what's in here. And these are projects that are on the earlier side of the TIP, so they're projects that we're planning to get to sooner than later. And in fact, we are working on some of them as we speak. So just briefly, and maybe old news to some of you, but just wanted to go through a few of these projects. So first is and these are not in a particular order, they're just meant to be representative of the kinds of projects that you'll find in our TIP. So the Newport Way Maple Street to Sunset is proposed to be about a $23 million project. It builds a 3-lane roadway, as you can see, basically from Maple to Sunset. A lot of these projects, you'll see one of the themes that's consistent, I think, through many of these projects is that they're multimodal. So they're not necessarily all about automobile capacity. They may improve automobile capacity, but in many cases, besides doing that, they're constructing facilities that don't currently exist. So Newport Way, as you can see here, has really inadequate, has no bike lanes and inadequate sidewalks, and so this would improve that street for all methods of travel. It proposes to treat intersections with roundabouts, and also will, if we do everything right, we'll blend this seamlessly with the developments that come in along Newport. So consistent with the central Issaquah plan, I talked about the non-motorized conditions, and the 3-lane section we know with the roundabout control will improve traffic flow as well. And so this is, just so you know, these are some slides that we had from our budget conversations, and this ranking, which we can get into a bit more, but that's really has more to do with council criteria, which I don't happen to have those along with me tonight, but council adopted criteria for capital projects, and within those criteria, there's a bunch of elements within those criteria, and each of the projects were scored according to those many criteria and then assigned a ranking. So I wouldn't, the ranking part, I wouldn't worry too much about this word acceptable. It's more about, the ranking is more about helping us, helping the council, helping the community prioritize these projects. So that's what this is sort of in here from the budget discussion. So that's one project. And then the other sort of complementary pair to that, to Newport, if you want to think, is the Newport, section of Newport that is west of 900, so from 900 to 54th. And you've probably heard a lot about this. It's a pretty high priority corridor for the city. There's several new developments, Gateway and Riva and Bergsma, and maybe one or two others that are happening along here. It's originally was built, I think, as I understand it, was the main east-west highway going east over the mountain. So it's, as you can see, it still sort of has that highway look, has some super elevation. So the goal of this project is to go from this sort of former highway, residual highway that's out there now to an urban street section. Again, with similar to the other Newport, 3 lanes, bike lanes, sidewalks, tying it in with a development that is happening along there. And we are actually, on this project, we're starting work this year. We're having actually a couple of workshops coming up we know this is a really high priority project for the community, and it has a lot of community interest, so we're very interested in working with the community, especially the neighborhoods, the neighbors, the folks that live along Newport that see the biggest impacts, both from the private development along there and from any capital project that we would build there. And this is another project. This is, you've seen this project on the transportation bond last fall. This is a project that is, Providence Point is meant to more safely connect the two sides of Providence Point with a signalized intersection, provides better motorist safety and pedestrian safety at this connection. The project, the reason that this makes sense to us to move forward on is it's mostly design. It was actually designed and just about ready to go out to bid, as I understand it, and for whatever reason, we couldn't come up with the funding, so the project's been on hold for some time now. It would require some amount of work to revisit the plans and specs and bring them up to current standards, but the project's close to being ready to be built. So Gilman is another project that's pretty a key, we think is a key important project for the city. It's one of the main east-west connections across the city and ties in Front Street to 900. As you know from your trips up and down Gilman, and there's some issues with access control and some confusing driveways and conflicts with left turns. And so we know that this corridor needs a comprehensive design, and we're in fact going out for a consultant to help us start with that, start to understand what the work on Gilman should be and what the constraints are. And we're going to do a lot of fact gathering, a lot of data gathering initially, and then again engage the community on what the appropriate design for Gilman should look like. And this is also important because of a lot of land use that's potentially land use changes that can happen along this corridor. You've seen with Atlas being maybe the first one. It's going to be easier for us to condition development and less confusing both for staff and developers if we have an overall corridor plan that we can point to when developments come in. And hopefully when developments come in with a plan, then we can have them, their frontage improvements will presumably construct portions of this as properties redevelop. So Complete Streets, this is a project that's going through, this is a project that's going through some changes. Initially, Complete Streets, or historically Complete Streets, have been a variety of mostly non-motorized improvements, ADA, crossings, those kinds of sidewalk gap type improvements. We're currently talking to council about what this program should look like moving forward. But again, the main focus of this project in here that you'll see in here is to improve safety for non-motorized users. Just
Question on the Complete Streets.
Yes.
What's the difference between what's covered in the Complete Streets and then a couple of the other projects in the packet that are just specifically bike lane and pedestrian
Right.
intersection improvements?
Can we come back to that?
Sure.
That's a great question. I'd like to talk to you about that a little bit because like I said, that's a great question. And like I said, we're currently talking to council about what Complete Streets really means. So appreciate that there may be a little confusion on that. So don't hold that
Okay.
thought. So this is a significant project, and we don't know what this would totally be, but I just have it in here to sort of give you a range, give you an idea. So we have projects this is several projects that total $5 million, and this is one project that totals nearly $50 million. And so this would presumably do something, we don't know exactly what, to reconfigure the Front Street and I-90. We are currently getting started. So WashDOT is leading an IJR, which is an interchange justification report that will look at potential improvements or changes to this intersection. So we'll know more what this project might be at the end of that process, which is, I think, slated to start almost immediately and be done by the end of 2018. What's interesting about the IJ, and the reason I put this slide in here, what's interesting about the IJR is it's called and its focus, as you can see from the circle here, on Front Street, the interchange at Front Street and I-90, but actually we'll be looking, as part of the IJR, we're required to look at as far west as 900 and as far east as the next interchange here. And so we're really interested in that because the city has a real interest in a potential, an additional crossing of I-90. Somewhere in the vicinity of, we say between 10th and 12th, somewhere Maple Street, somewhere roughly halfway between the two current interchanges. So that probably would not be an interchange, it'd probably be a crossing. But we think it's really important, for tying the two sides of Issaquah together better with a connection. And it also could, we're a little premature on this perhaps, but it could be an area where light rail, when light rail comes to Issaquah, we're not sure where that's going to come. So that would, getting some more clarity on a possible connection here would be really important to us. So we're excited. We're excited about working with the state on this IJR project, not only for what it might mean here, but also what it could mean for an additional crossing of I-90. And then, won't talk too much about this. This is a project that's underway. This is the big project that is going to connect the Pickering area, the Costco area, over to East Lake Sammamish. So kind of an interesting sidelight about this is I was just talking to Sheldon Lynn, our Public Works Director, this afternoon about this project, and he mentioned that, roughly, don't quote me on this, but roughly our cost, although it's a $40 million project, the city's cost is roughly 10 cents on the dollar. So there's a bunch of grant funding that's associated with this project, and Costco's paying for a portion of it. So although it's a big price tag, it's an important connection, again, important connection on now the north side of I-90 that is mostly funded by others. And then sort of, near to that, which is sort of we're going to look at that after the 62nd project, is this, right when you get off the freeway here at 900, this intersection where Tully's and T-Mobile is not working very well now. So this project anticipates making improvements at that intersection. And then, this is in here, I think, just to give you another type of project that we're looking at. So this is looking to support, so this is sort of partly driven by the Central Park, but also the need for signalization and better control, especially pedestrian crossing control along the street. So, and that one, small project, which is sort of to your point earlier, how is this different from complete streets projects? And this is down by the school and is meant to complete a portion of missing link in sidewalks, small project. Again, to help illustrate sort of a range of projects. And then I think this is about our last slide here. Another project on north of the freeway that will sort of the missing piece of 221st. So 221st is improved to the north of here, and then the 62nd project will make improvements south of here. So this is to bring this small section of street up to standards and to match the rest of the improvements there. And then, I think this is, I keep saying the last slide, but so this is what I was mentioning a moment ago. So this is, we think this is a logical outcome of the interchange justification report. So it's a crossing, and this is probably not right in terms of being the accurate line, but it's probably is right in terms of the general location. And the biggest reason, the biggest benefit to us, we feel, is that north-south connectivity. Oh, I'm more slides in here than I want. So here's a sort of a different kind of project, not really a street project or a multimodal project at all, but just acknowledging that we also need to be doing street repairs and maintenance. And this is a retaining wall that was originally through King County in a developer project, and it has some issues. So we know that needs to be repaired. It needs to be repaired, obviously, before it fails. So that's not a complete list, but it's meant to give you sort of a taste of the kinds of projects we're looking at that are in the TIP. So I'm going to stop there. What time it is?
5.
Okay. So that's half. I've used up half your time. So, so I'd be happy to just start with your question or however you want to do this.
I just have a quick question.
Sure.
You know, we go through this every year, and some of the projects, they go up or down depending on the funding and the sources, and I understand that. The question just went out of my mind. Are there any projects that will be completed in the next 2 years?
So, well, sure. So so just to start with the complete streets projects, those have typically been a number of smaller projects, 4 or 5 smaller projects. We completed 4 or 5 last year. We just went out to bid for another 4 or 5 projects this year. Those are all small projects, so those typically get completed every year. So those are the kinds of projects that get completed.
And those are
So-
off, they're off now, they're not on the list to do, so those are completed and
And
off
so
the
we're doing,
project.
and we're correct. And
So-
so that's in a way, that's sort of more of a program type project. So there's new projects there has historically been this line item in here called Complete Streets that's contains several small projects, non-motorized improvements. Those get completed every year, and then there's new projects. The council's been funding those at something less than $1 million a year. So that allows us to build, like I said, 4 or 5 smaller projects that get completed every year. There's some larger projects. So we just completed East Lake Sammamish Parkway improvements last year. So that's a project that we completed. So that was last year. In the next 2 years, to answer your question, we'll be completing the 62nd project, which is a huge, big project for us. So that's slated to be complete by the end of 2018. Some of the other projects, we are actively moving forward with design and/or preliminary design for, so we have grant funding to do preliminary design in 2018 for the Newport Way from Maple to Sunset. So we're planning to do that starting January 2018. We are working on we're currently working on preliminary design for Newport from 900 to 54th, and we are beginning design for Gilman. So that's not exactly well, I guess does that answer your question? So there's a lot of projects in the works. Some of them are construction projects, some of them are in other phases. But there's a lot of projects moving forward currently.
So I don't have my paperwork from last year, so
Okay.
I could compare
Mhm.
the two. Is there a way to get copies of both of them? Just,
Sure.
I know we have some new members on the committee, and they need to understand the process of going up and down and how you get, they might be important, but you have no funding, so you can't do them. But why? The question is, we need this, it's dangerous, we need to have it fixed. And if there's no money to fix it, we slide it off for 2 years.
Yeah, we can get you some information that will help.
Just as a basis point. And 221st is being worked on now,
So,
next to the Big Bear. Isn't that 221st?
right, so I don't know if I can do this, I don't know if I can go back here. So there's a portion, right, so there's a portion here. So here's, I can really see this. So this is where, is that Taco Time there? And
Well, it's
then-
blocked off, so I
and
know
there-
they're digging holes and,
Right, well, be
I
sure to
believe
go
that's
down
because
there.
of 62nd.
Right, the businesses are
Because of
open,
the
but we want to be sure.
addition.
Yeah, because they gotta rebuild the two.
So 221st is open to the businesses, just to be clear. But you're not going to be able to go through there. And so 221st, a portion is actually the 62nd project. A portion of that roadway at 4th basically is getting constructed as a part of the 62nd project. But there is this one sort of left remnant piece between the 62nd project and the existing improved 221st on the north, which is this piece, which will not be finished off by the 62nd project. So that's why it's in here. It's sort of, it's the remaining.
I was just trying to clarify.
Yeah,
if-
so there's a project here, this part's built out, and then there's a sort of a remnant piece between our 62nd project and the improved portion of 221st.
Anybody have any questions?
Oh, yeah, I got a lot of questions.
Go for it.
Why did I look at you?
Okay, so first of all, the 62nd project, which is score number 80, what does a score mean?
So,
And then the priority, I
Right.
see it says desirable, acceptable,
Right.
deferrable.
and that's the one thing so
The 62nd is already underway, is it not?
you're looking at this sheet right here, correct?
Yes.
So this is,
The reason I'm asking is because why would we even be looking at that in this study, except for background information?
well, it's been approved and we're underway, I suppose. It's in here because the funding is part of our budget. So to back up just a little, so what you're seeing here, as I mentioned earlier, is a portion of the city's capital improvement project. And this format and this score and priority column over here is something that is new for all of us. And it is meant to, across all departments, provide a uniform scoring and these words have meaning. I'd be very happy to get you our budget document that talks about, that shows what these words mean and that kind. So, but it's the words are kind of a little.
Yes, it would be helpful if you provided the detail behind the scoring
So
and the wording.
I'd be happy to do that. The words come out of that document. This is the portion of the city's capital project approach to projects. And the idea of the scoring, of course, is to prioritize these in a way, and this is the work that council's been doing to, they either can agree with this ranking and scoring or not. These criteria and the scoring and the wording here is the result of our finance department working with council to come up with those criteria. So those are not our criteria. Those are citywide council-adopted criteria on how to look at projects. So, and
Okay.
yes, absolutely, we can get you that. It's a one-page sheet. It's pretty self-explanatory. We can absolutely get that for you.
It just seems a little misleading that it's ranked number 80 and it's considered desirable, yet it's already underway. And
So-
even if we said no, you can't pull it because
Right,
it's
so-
committed.
So, yeah, you're right. And so I think it would, the only thing I wish we could get that to you. I wish you had that tonight, but it makes more sense if you look at the criteria and the scoring and the sheets that were developed by the council and the criteria. So I appreciate your comments about 60 seconds. Like, what does that really mean? The project's under construction. Shouldn't it either be off the list or it's scored at 100%? But this is the way, when you apply the criteria and the scoring, this is the way it came out.
I think it's important to see because it's a large chunk of the 2018 projected spending.
I think it would be helpful
$1 million
to clarify between what's committed and fully funded versus what is desirable but not necessarily committed,
Yep,
and to understand how much wiggle room we have.
yep. And so we've never, and so this isn't maybe super helpful to you, but this is all new. This is all sort of a work in progress. We're doing this now for the first time citywide. So I don't know that any of us are the experts on it, but I can certainly share with you the information that was used to come up with this scoring and that was developed with the finance department and the city council, of course.
I also have a question here about the Three Trails Crossing,
Mm-hmm.
which is number 61 for anyone who wants to look. I noticed it's slotted out for 2022, so it's on the 5-year plan, which I'm thankful for. One, is there a reason why it's out to 2022? And can that be pulled in? If so, how close can we move that in? If
So, and that's a good, that's. I
So
don't-
isn't that one already in the works?
So, yeah, so the Three Trails Crossing is a little bit of an outlier in the sense that it has been planned and budgeted for some time in our plan. And I think after this was developed and started through the process, we reached an agreement with the developer on the north side of that intersection for Three Trails. And so what they're going to do is build a signal at Three Trails, which is a bulk of what we wanted to do here, and move the pedestrian crossing from the west to that intersection. And the city's going to pay a portion of those improvements, I think about $375,000, something like that, and the developer's going to pay the rest. What it doesn't, so what's in here is probably not accurate, and in fact, but there's probably, I don't know if we have this completely figured out at this point, but there's probably a project in here going forward that you'll see next year, let's say, that is called something like Three Trails Crossing, because what the developer is not making improvements to or changes to is the south side of that intersection. So there may be the need for improvements. So you know how Juniper and Rainier come in there is kind of awkward. So they're going to build a signal for that intersection that is functional and safe and is a good connection for the trail, but it doesn't address the south side. So there's still sort of there's sort of a modified version, if you want, a new version of Three Trails Crossing project that needs to be in here for next year's. And which year that goes in is a good question.
So this is really nothing more than a placeholder, because when we first developed this, it was before the developer.
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, and so this is, right. This is as you can imagine, so it's not, although we have a lot of projects in our list, there's, the whole list is even bigger. So it's quite and because we're doing it for the first time this year, it's been quite an effort just to get the whole document together. And so there's been some hard deadlines on when things could get in here and when they could be moved around and changed. And so there's some things in here that, even though this is fairly recent, have actually, there's been some changes already before this is even adopted. So
I think that you will find that some of these projects have not had their environmental study, they haven't done all the work that needs to be done, and I will guarantee you that all of them are going to be changed in some way. But until we get the funding in order to do that, you know, even talking about why you're doing this or why you're doing that doesn't lead to an answer that you're going to be happy with, because there will be no specific answer. But they're going to be changed, and they're all going to come back next year, and you're going to go through the same process of, well, yeah, we thought we could get the funding here and the grant here, but no, it's not coming to fruition, so we're moving that project down the line. And this one, which nobody thought was really important, has full funding, so that moves up to the top. So anyway, I just.
Yeah.
that's very well put. So it's, you know, there's funding in here, there's assumptions made about grants and types of funding that we think we might get. There's assumptions made about when we can do this work, but it's not the last word on transportation projects. We look at this every year. We're constantly thinking about ways to fund them and update these plans. So this is a once-a-year time where this plan comes to you for your comment, for your review, and ask questions. But it's
And add to the process.
And add to the,
anything
yes,
that
absolutely.
these guys say will be, you know, put in the record, so you have
Absolutely.
something to look at
Yes. So
for any
we're
future things that you want to do.
so yes.
We've got one last question for you for Newport, Maple to Sunset. I know that I think it's Innswood Development is going to be paying for, or at least a substantial portion for a roundabout.
Correct.
How committed are we to doing the full entire build-out of that road, as opposed to ripping up the asphalt to just do a new top? Because from what I understand, or from what I've heard from people, is that the road itself underneath may be wearing out, and so we're kind of stuck with doing not a recap, but maybe a new road. But do we really need all the other improvements to go along with that?
So
Or can we just stick with putting a road in?
Well, the way the project is scoped and what our grant money is based on is what you see here. So it's fundamentally different roadway than what's out there now.
Yeah, won't the footprint of this road almost double by the time you add additional lane, bike lanes, multi-use
Right.
path and whatnot?
So it's, right.
No,
It's a-
not even with the roundabout. I mean, the roundabouts are a major improvement, but you're also almost doubling the right of way.
It's all the other improvements. It's the sidewalk and bike lanes and the third lane, which could be, in some cases that may be a median, some cases it may be a turn lane.
Correct me if I'm wrong, I thought in the transportation levy that was pitched as it was going to be a southbound lane. There are going to be two southbound and one
Right,
northbound.
and that's something we'll be looking at. So there's currently a southbound lane. Can't remember off the top of my head how far south that goes, but that's something, there are two southbound lanes. You're absolutely right. And the length of how far those go is something I think we're going to want to revisit.
Okay, so it's going to be 3 lanes, but whether that's 2 southbound or turn lanes is to be determined. Yeah.
Right, that's something we need to look at moving forward. And like I said, our plan now there was some confusion at PSRC about which projects regionally we're going to get funded in which years, but we just found out here this last week that this project has funding for the initial design for 2018, so we're excited to move forward on that in 2018, so.
So the 2018 number and the 2019 numbers, what does that do? 1.1, or almost the 1.2, and the 400,000. What kind of work does that do? Because those are pretty low numbers compared to the 11 million, which is in 2021, which is
Right,
probably road
I'd have to
surface.
go back and look at the backup for this, but I think that in general, those first 3 years, so the 1.1, the 400,000, and the 2 million are in combination meant to do all of the design work and probably right-of-way acquisition. That would be our plan. And then I'm thinking from the way this looks and my recollection that the construction part of the project, so the almost 12 million and then the 9 million in 21 and 22 would be the construction dollars for that project. So this is the preliminary environmental design, right-of-way acquisition elements in the first 3 years here.
And is any portion of this already granted? Because I know this was on the transportation bond.
Right.
And
Well,
it
so we
failed.
have PSRC funding for a portion of this. I think it's I'd have to go back and look at the numbers. I think it may be the 1.1, or it may be actually, the grant money may be, I want to say it was 1.7. So, but we have grant money for the initial, we have grant money to fund the initial design and not all of not everything. We don't have grant money currently for the whole, whatever that adds up to, I guess nearly $4 million. We don't have grant money for that, but we have grant money to start the design, so that's what we're going to do.
So if you do this study, you have the grant to do the study, and at the end of the study, you don't have the funding to continue, does it just sit on the shelf, and then when you finally do get the money, do you have to start all over again?
So we're not, so first of all, we are constantly looking for opportunities for funding throughout this, so we're not waiting to get through design here. and actually this is more than a study for this particular project, it's actually the preliminary design work. So it's doing the work so that you could build the project.
Right.
But to your point, you get all the design work done, and then you don't have the $20 million or whatever that's needed to construct the project. Then what? So, I mean, I don't know if I'm smart enough to have all of the answers on that. One alternative is a bond, which this was part of, as a way of funding it. Another way is to look for other grant opportunities. Portions of this, not nearly all of it, but portions of it, as we move forward and have the plan, portions of it will be built by development as it comes in. For example, the roundabout at Juniper. So portions of it may get built that way, but our way of working here is to not. We don't necessarily get all of the funding lined up before we start. We start and we move forward.
No,
And-
I understand that. I just don't want to have to go back and to pay another $2, $3, $4 million to do another environmental study and a new design. Is that valid for so many years?
Right, well,
or is
that's a really good question. That's a very good point. And I don't know if I can answer that, but if your point is sort of the Providence Point signal example, where we had the design complete, ready to go, and now we're going to have to go back and do a certain amount of updating work before we can actually go out to bid with that. It's sort of the same thing maybe you're asking for. So certainly the longer project, so if a project's designed and ready to go and has no way to build it, it can sit on the shelf, but each year it does that, it's likely to get further out of compliance with stormwater regulations or whatever. And so, we don't want to get ahead of ourselves too far, I suppose, but we also don't want to, we also can't wait. We don't want to wait until we have all of the funding figured out before we start on the design.
So the Newport, here's where I'm having a struggle. The voters already, when they voted on the bond, it was a no. Why is Newport already, why are we even talking about Newport? That's a $24 million ask, and the voters felt that it was mostly cosmetic. I know we're adding 2 lanes to one side for a portion, not for the whole thing. It's not going to be a traffic alleviator so much as it is going to be a beautification project and adding bike lanes, which we already have bike lanes and sidewalks. So why are we talking about doing this project as it was presented to the voters last year?
So,
I'm a little confused by that. Because it seems like we say no, and then the city comes back and says, oh, but we're going to go ahead and do it anyways, and we're funding it.
I'll disagree with that assessment. I felt like the Sunset Boulevard was definitely aesthetic, but I think the Newport is definitely adding capacity, both with the roundabouts and with the additional lanes. Simply just adding left turn lanes adds capacity. I think I did get, and this is armchair analysis, but I did get the impression the Sunset Way was very much seen as a purely cosmetic, but I think I would disagree. I think the Newport Way is definitely, in addition to cosmetic improvements, I think it's definitely a very material improvement to capacity and to safety in ways that I don't think you could credibly argue that the Sunset Boulevard component of the transportation levy was.
and I just
wanted to throw that in as a comment.
Yeah, just to add to this, so that I'm not sure that I would characterize the non-motorized components, the non-motorized components of the project as cosmetic. We know that cars are going to have a place, and capacity is important in Issaquah for the foreseeable future. We know that, but we also know that in the future we're going to also have to strengthen. We have other ways of getting around better than what we have now. So by constructing those non-motorized facilities, the sidewalks and the bike lanes, and you're going to set up the roadway better for transit service, and it is very close to a transit center on the northwest end, and so if you have good non-motorized facilities, and then you can develop better transit service, and then you can give people alternatives to driving their car. So I wouldn't necessarily characterize the bike lanes and the sidewalks as aesthetic. They provide safety, and they also give us some opportunities for other ways of getting around the city than the car. So that's why a lot of these projects you'll see a strong non-motorized component to them is for because we know multimodal corridors have more functionality than just streets built for the automobile.
So are you saying, in your opinion, do you feel that it's actually going to move more cars?
So with the two southbound with the two southbound through lanes, there'll be more capacity, and so capacity isn't just the lanes though. Capacity is a lot of if you think about your own driving experience, where you get stuck typically is at intersections, and so by making better intersection improvements, which is a big portion of this project as well, for example, the roundabout at Juniper is also a way of more efficiently moving traffic down the corridor. So it will definitely do that.
How is that going to happen if all the traffic is stopped up because of the intersection with Newport and Front Street?
Right. So does this need to be looked at as a system? Absolutely. And does this project by itself solve our transportation dilemmas in Issaquah? It absolutely doesn't, but it's a piece of it. And so if your point is, are you taking all the cars to Front Street and then what? So that we need to look at that as well. So this is a piece of the puzzle, I would say, but doesn't necessarily solve everything.
Okay.
All of these are small pieces of the puzzle. It's
Because there's only
yeah.
7 minutes left.
Yes.
Did you ever answer AJ's question
I
about
didn't. I was
the
trying to avoid
complete
it.
streets?
so I wasn't trying
I
to
just
wait.
wanted to be sure.
We don't,
because
in the
that
interest of time, we can cover that later. I don't think
Okay, well, I
need
can
to
give
answer
you
now.
I can give you a
was the
1-minute
first question.
answer.
I thought, did we ever answer that one? Okay.
I can give you a 1-minute answer, and that's so the complete streets has been a little puzzling for all of us about what projects go into a complete street plan versus what's other smaller projects or standalone, and I think that's going to be more clear moving forward. I think the complete streets program is probably not going to be called complete streets, and we're probably going to pull all the smaller projects out and have them all be standalone. What was formerly the complete streets will be more about sidewalk maintenance and ADA compliant ramps to support our overlay and those types of things. And so there won't be going forward.
So it'll be very small dollars. or
It'll be small dollars, and
projects
it'll
that are
be
then
much
bundled.
more clear,
Okay.
we hope. Did that answer? Was that?
Yeah, that's good.
Did I stay under a minute?
Thank you. Yes, you did.
I've
I
got
have
two
a-
quick questions. I know there are two projects that City Council's been talking about, and I believe has either pushed through or is very close to, the Target Roundabout and then also the Front Street streetscape. So is the Target Roundabout on here, or has that already been?
So
It's on here.
it's not on here. Well,
It was in the printout. Is it here?
so I don't think it's on here, but the Target Roundabout was initially a much larger project. I think it was about a $5 million project initially. It was a much larger scale project than what we currently are moving forward with, which is about a $360,000 project, I believe. And so that is part of our complete streets. That particular improvement is embedded in the complete streets program for this year. And I don't know about the Front Street improvements. That's
So the Front Street streetscape
Right.
is on here, but it has most of the money coming in 2020.
right. And so
Would that get shifted up? Is
And that-
there funding for that?
and that's I don't know. The one part that I don't know is how this has been shifted or moved as a result, because I've not been at the council workshop, so I don't know. But certainly those are the kinds of things that can get shifted around and moved up if council identifies that as a higher priority than what we have here.
Anybody else?
Yeah, can I make a, oh, sorry, Joe.
Quick question. So the Front Street and I-90 interchange, that one also, it's high, fairly high on the priority list, but not, no money allocated until after the 5-year plan and just future years. Is that because of the need for determining the best way to do the interchange, or what are the reasons that
I
that's
think-
not in the plan?
Sure, I think the biggest reason is,
Yeah, it's a large bill.
it's yes to everything you just said, I think. We haven't done the interchange justification study yet, and that will really inform, I think, what's going to happen at Front Street, and as well as what may happen for another crossing. So, and it's big dollars, so that's likely to be if that's going to get built, that's going to have some major, most likely state funding associated with it. That kind of money is not coming from the city.
Okay, so it's it's on the list to be aware
It's
of
right.
it in the context of
Right.
the list.
This
of
is not
projects?
it's a little confusing because this is not a funded list of all, so we don't have, sort of to some of you had sort of similar questions. We don't have a funding source for, it's a list of all the projects we've identified in the city that we think are valuable transportation projects. But especially as you get to the farther down the list and further out, the order of them is not, this is although it was ranked by our budget process, this may or may not be exactly the right priority. And when you get out in further years, when you start talking about funding, it gets a bit less clear, a little bit more fuzzy.
Okay, thank you.
On the 11th and 12th Avenue crossing, there's a
Yes.
lot of language about coordinating with Metro and Sound Transit.
Mm-hmm.
One comment is I think it would be good to incorporate similar language in all the other I-90 crossings.
Okay.
So that's 4 different projects, and I think the I-90 Front Street interchange should also include language around coordinating with Sound Transit. Not necessarily with the placement of Sound Transit 3 light rail project, but starting to look for future light rail extensions, have that in scope on whether or not you want to rebuild things as far as the Front Street. And then, in the same vein, I think the city should be putting its own money towards studying where they want the Issaquah central Issaquah light rail station location and alignment should be. Not, obviously, the actual construction is, 20 years away? But I think when looking at things like building the bridges and then rebuilding Gilman, or not rebuilding Gilman, but doing improvements in Gilman, I think the city needs to make a decision on where it wants the light rail station, whether or not it's going to be in line on I-90, whether or not it's going to be in line in Gilman or in line on SR 900. I think it would be important to make a decision within this 5-year time frame on what alignment they want, so that can then dictate what investments you make in the street grid, and also more broadly where you allow development, where you don't allow development because you want to be running a light rail causeway in 15 years that goes through there. So I think that's something that, now that the Sound Transit 3 has passed and we know we're getting a light rail station eventually, I think the city needs to decide where they want that station to be, so all these other projects can then take that into account in terms of how they're feeding traffic, both bringing multimodal towards the station and also ensuring that through car traffic does not go by the station. So you don't have non-park and ride traffic getting caught up at the station, wherever that may be.
I agree. I'd like to see some of those funds in this 5-year period, if it would be at all possible.
Just start looking at that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's more important than doing more studies on where we want to cross I-90 with the bridge, because you can't make that decision until you know where your light rail station is. And then more broadly, it would be great if you could build the bridge with the light rail station and, leverage Sound Transit station access funding for that. I mean, that's not putting the cart before the horse, but I think that's the kind of things we need to be thinking of now that we know we're getting a light rail station at some point.
So we're almost out of time. I do want to follow up with that. We had talked about the same thing during the creating the plan, the central area plan, and you guys have said it more succinctly than we did, but it's something the city really, really needs to do, and I'm glad you brought it up. Is there anything else? Because we have 2 minutes left to ask any questions that you might.
One tiny one in terms of leveraging other studies, the Old Town parking structure, I think should take a shout out in terms of the parking studies that are going on around Old Town, or whether or not we even want parking, are we going to pay for parking and whatnot, because that also all needs to be done before we start looking at building a structure, not building a structure.
So in essence, we want every project done by next year
I hope to come back
so
to,
that so that we can drive everywhere we want without any delays whatsoever, and everything is done, and it's a perfect world.
I'll second that.
So did you get what you needed?
that's very clear direction. We'll get what you want.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, done.
Okay.
With that, Trish, do you have something that you have to add? Otherwise, we're going to
Otherwise, we're gonna.
cut the meeting off right now.
And then go sit down
Yes.
here. And
So we'll end the meeting at 5:59. Thank you.
Correct. Right on time. You got a transportation background?
No.